let's jump right in. Today we're doing a deep dive into the new East Baltimore project.
Okay.
You know, our listeners, they're really interested in getting the full scoop on this whole thing.
Yeah.
Um, what's the background on this project? What were some of the, the hurdles they had to overcome?
Right.
And probably most importantly was the community. Think
Yeah.
about it all.
Yeah. That's key.
So we've got some fascinating articles here.
Mm-hmm.
And they really shed some light on, the whole trajectory of this project,
Yeah.
especially how this plan for, like this big biotech hub
Yeah.
kind of took this unexpected turn
Yeah.
toward education.
Yeah. The original vision for New East Baltimore was quite different.
Yeah.
And they were really going for this world-class biotech park.
Right.
They were thinking they'd attract these big companies,
Yeah.
create tons of jobs,
Uh-huh.
revitalize the whole area.
Yeah. Sounds great in theory.
Yeah, well, it kind of hit a snag,
Oh,
and ultimately it just wasn't feasible.
okay.
Yeah.
So that is a pretty dramatic shift.
It is.
Going from like this bustling biotech hub to a state-of-the-art school.
Totally.
So did these articles that we have, did they explain what led to that change in direction?
Well, they point to a few factors. For one, the biotech park ran into some serious financial roadblocks.
Oh, like what?
Well, potential investors got cold feet and pulled out.
Okay.
And then the housing construction that was supposed to go along with it, that fell way behind schedule.
Oh, wow.
They wanted to build 700 units,
Uh-huh.
and those plans are pretty much stalled right now.
Oh, wow. So it sounds like they just kind of had to,
Yeah.
shift gears.
Pivot.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
they pivoted to this school-first strategy.
Exactly.
What's the thinking behind that?
Well, Christopher Shea, the CEO of East Baltimore Development, Inc., EBDI, the group leading this whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
he believes that having a really top-notch school will actually attract more residents,
Okay.
which would then boost development. He's actually quoted in one of these articles saying, the existence of the school will enhance our ability to build and sell residential.
So build the school first, and then that'll get everything else rolling.
That's the idea, yeah. And it is a pretty stark contrast to what they were saying in their earlier annual reports,
Yeah.
which were all about, biotech.
Biotech.
Exact.
Okay, so let's talk about this school.
So-
What can you tell us about it?
Well, it's a pretty ambitious project.
Okay.
They're building this brand new school, a whole 7-acre campus.
Wow.
It's going to replace that old rundown Elmer A. Henderson Elementary School.
Okay.
The new school, it's going to be called the East Baltimore Community School.
Okay.
Get this, it's going to be a partnership between Johns Hopkins University and Baltimore City Public Schools.
Wow, a partnership
Yeah.
between like a prestigious university like Johns Hopkins
Right.
and the city's public school system.
Uh-huh. That's a pretty unique combo.
That is pretty unique.
Uh-huh.
How does that work in practice?
Well, that's one of the really fascinating things about this whole project.
Okay.
The school's going to have this curriculum designed with input from both institutions.
Okay.
And there's even talk of having, Johns Hopkins faculty,
Yeah.
maybe even Nobel laureates
Oh, wow.
involved in mentoring students.
That's really cool.
Yeah, but while the long-term goal is to have this school serve, a diverse mix of students
Yeah.
from all kinds of backgrounds,
Uh,
the reality right now is quite different.
oh, really? What do you mean?
Well, the school, it's currently operating out of 3 portable classrooms
Oh, wow.
with just 207 students.
Huh. So there's this big gap between the vision
Yeah,
and what's actually happening on the ground right now.
right.
Yeah. Okay, so that does raise some questions for me.
Sure.
Like, what about the community's reaction to all of this? I mean, they're the ones who are, directly impacted by this project.
Absolutely. And these articles, they do give us a glimpse into their perspective.
Okay.
Kathleen J. Miles, the principal of the school,
Mm-hmm.
she's quoted as being, cautiously optimistic.
Makes sense.
She sees the partnership with Johns Hopkins as, potentially a good thing.
Yeah.
But she also emphasizes the need for respect for the community,
Right.
academic success for the students,
Mm-hmm.
and addressing those issues that are already present in the community, things like fighting and gangs.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It seems like, for her, building trust
Yeah.
and creating this safe learning environment,
Right.
those are her top priorities.
It sounds like there are just a lot of really complex dynamics at play here.
Yeah, definitely.
On one hand, you've got this ambitious vision for revitalization,
Right.
and on the other, you have this community that's, understandably cautious.
Yeah,
And they want to make sure that their voices are heard.
exactly.
There's lots of balance.
It is. And then there's the whole issue of funding.
Oh, right. Money always comes into play.
Oh, always the school's budget. It's this mix of private donations, city bonds, and foundation grants.
Okay.
But here's the interesting thing. Public funds haven't actually been allocated to its construction yet. Oh, why? Which is kind of surprising considering that Baltimore has this huge backlog of school repairs and upgrades.
Yeah.
There's a 2010 ACLU report that estimated the city needs something like $2.8 billion
Well,
just to bring its existing schools up to par.
okay. So that does put the decision to prioritize this new school in a different light.
It does.
Do these articles, do they give us any insight into why that might be the case?
They don't really explain the reasoning behind the funding allocation directly,
Okay.
but it does raise questions about, fairness
Mm-hmm.
and how resources are distributed within the city's education system.
Yeah, so it seems like there's this tension
There is.
between, trying to create this shiny new revitalized community
Right.
and making sure that the people who are already living there aren't
Mhm.
left behind in the process. And I don't want to ignore the elephant in the room here,
Sure.
race.
Yeah.
The sources we have, they don't really dive deep into racial issues,
They don't.
but it's worth noting that the current student population of this temporary school
Right.
is 100% African American,
Mhm.
which mirrors the demographics of the community that was displaced to make way for this project.
You're right.
So even though it's not explicitly stated in the articles,
Mhm.
there are these clear racial dynamics at play here
Absolutely.
that we just can't ignore.
You can't, especially given the history of urban renewal projects
Exactly.
and their disproportionate impact on minority communities.
That's a good point. It's a sensitive issue, for
Yeah.
sure, and one that deserves further exploration.
For sure.
And it seems like Johns Hopkins University plays a big role in all of this, too.
They do. They're a major player.
Yeah. So let's dive into that a bit more.
Okay.
What can you tell us about their involvement?
Well, their president, Ronald J. Daniels, he seems pretty invested in the school's success.
Okay. Let's hear about that.
Yeah, according to one of these articles, Daniels sees the East Baltimore Community School as a key part of this whole new East Baltimore project.
Mm-hmm.
He even compares it to his experience with a similar school in West Philadelphia.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and it really highlights his belief in this kind of education model.
It sounds like he's really passionate about this.
He does.
What's his vision for the school?
Well, he's thinking very hands-on mentoring style approach.
Okay.
He wants different departments within Johns Hopkins to get directly involved with the school's activities.
Wow.
He thinks that faculty from all these different disciplines can offer some really unique learning opportunities for the kids.
Yeah, that does sound like a pretty involved approach.
It is.
But what about the community's perspective on Johns Hopkins' role in all of this?
Yeah.
I imagine there might be some mixed feelings there,
You're right, there are.
especially considering that they were the ones displaced by the project.
Exactly. And the articles do touch on that Daniels himself acknowledges that there's some distrust
Okay.
from certain residents in Middle East
Mm.
who see the university as like an interloper in their community.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it sounds like building trust is going to be crucial for Johns Hopkins
It is.
if they want to be seen as, a true partner in this whole thing,
That's right.
especially if they want to ensure that the benefits of this project
Yeah.
are shared by everyone,
Mm-hmm.
including those who were displaced.
100%.
It's a fascinating case study.
It is.
In urban revitalization, you've got these high hopes,
Right.
these potential pitfalls,
Yeah.
and this community that's trying to navigate a future
Mm-hmm.
that's still very much being written.
It's a story in progress.
Yeah,
For sure.
It's exciting.
And complex.
Yeah, it is.
Very complex.
Yeah.
It's this intricate kind of dance between progress and preservation
Yeah.
that makes this project so interesting. They're trying to revitalize this area. Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, they want to make sure that the existing community isn't left behind.
Right.
It's a real tightrope walk.
It is. And that tension between those two goals seems to be like woven into so many aspects of this project.
Absolutely.
I mean, remember how we were just talking about that stalled housing construction?
Yeah.
The original plan called for 700 new housing units,
Right.
but that just hasn't happened.
Well, yeah, and digging a little deeper into those articles that you shared,
Mm-hmm.
it seems like financial hurdles played a big role in those delays.
Okay.
The project relied heavily on private investments,
Yeah.
and those investments kind of dried up when the biotech park idea fell apart.
Well, yeah, I mean, it makes sense that investors will get a little hesitant when the anchor tenant, bails on a project like that.
Exactly.
So
So,
what happened financially for New East Baltimore when that happened?
well, according to the Daily Record, they really had to scramble for funding.
Uh-huh.
They ended up cobbling together this mix of city bonds, foundation grants.
And even some federal funds, just to
Wow.
keep
Yeah.
the project going.
So they were piecing it together from all these different sources.
Yeah, but this patchwork of funding, it wasn't enough
Right.
to cover all of their initial ambitions.
Yeah, so that's where this decision to prioritize the school comes in. It
Exactly.
seems like they shifted gears to focus on something they could actually, get built in the short term.
Right, they're betting that a successful school will kind of create this ripple effect
Okay.
and eventually attract more investment and revitalize the rest of the project.
So they're hoping that the school will be the catalyst to
Exactly.
get everything else moving.
Yeah, it's a risky strategy, though.
Yeah.
As we've been discussing, it's not without its critics.
Well, you mentioned earlier that there are some concerns about whether it's fair
Right.
to prioritize building this new school in this area
Mm-hmm.
when there are other schools in Baltimore that are in such bad shape.
Yeah.
So did the articles give us any more insight into how people in the wider community feel about that?
They did. Actually, one article quoted the CEO of Baltimore City Public Schools, Andres Alonso,
Okay.
and he expressed some skepticism.
What did he say?
Well, he pointed out that there are many other schools across the city that have much more urgent needs.
Okay.
And he even said, lots of people lobby me for construction money,
Oh, wow.
which really emphasizes how widespread the need is.
Yeah, so it doesn't sound like he's completely sold on this idea of, this new school being at the top of the priority list.
Not really.
And I can understand his perspective.
Yeah,
It's tough
it is.
trying to balance the needs of one community against the needs of the entire city.
Right. And then on top of that, you have the community itself having mixed feelings about the whole project.
Exactly. That's a good point.
We need to remember that this redevelopment project involved displacing a lot of longtime residents.
Yeah.
The goal was to create a mixed income community,
Right.
but there's always that risk of gentrification,
Right.
where the original residents are priced out of their own revitalized neighborhood.
Right. And that brings us back to those concerns about racial dynamics that we talked about before.
Right,
You know, even if it's not explicitly stated in the articles,
Yeah.
it's impossible to ignore the potential impact of a huge project like this
Mm-hmm.
on a historically black community.
You're right. The articles definitely hint at that tension.
Okay.
One resident actually referred to Johns Hopkins as an interloper in the community,
Wow.
which suggests that there is some distrust
Mm-hmm.
and some resentment toward the university.
It sounds like some residents see them as this powerful institution that's coming in and changing their neighborhood
Yeah.
without really understanding their needs.
Right, without really listening to them.
Right. Well, that raises a big question for me.
What's that?
What are the long-term consequences of this project?
Mm-hmm.
If they do manage to create this thriving mixed income community,
Yeah.
will the people who live there originally, will they be able to share in the benefits?
Right.
Or will they be pushed out?
That is the million-dollar question.
Yeah. And there's no easy answer, unfortunately.
Right.
The outcome depends on how the project evolves,
Mhm.
how they address those concerns about equity and inclusion, and whether they can actually build trust with the community.
Mhm.
It's a very complex situation.
It is, and we haven't even really touched on the impact this is going to have on the students themselves.
Right.
This new school, it's being touted as this key piece of the revitalization puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
But what does that actually mean for the kids who are going to school there right now?
Yeah.
Those temporary trailers.
Yeah. What are their hopes for the future?
Exactly. What are their dreams?
It's a crucial perspective.
It is.
We've been focusing so much on the big picture.
Yeah, the economics, the community dynamics.
Right. But at the heart of this project are those students
Right.
and their families
Yeah.
and their aspirations.
Absolutely. I completely agree. It's their lives that are going to be most affected by how all of this plays out.
100%. And it's easy to get caught up in, the grand plans and the political debates and all that.
Right.
But ultimately, the success of this project should be measured by its impact on the lives of the people
Mm-hmm.
who live and learn there.
Well said. It brings us back to that fundamental question that you raised earlier.
Okay.
Can a school really be the catalyst
Right.
for successful community revitalization?
It's a question that we've been circling around this whole time.
We have.
And based on what we've seen in these articles,
Yeah.
It seems like the answer is maybe.
Maybe.
It's not a guarantee.
Right, it depends on so many things.
Yeah.
And it definitely won't be easy.
No, it won't be easy at all.
It's a long process.
Mm.
It requires really careful planning,
Yeah.
genuine community engagement,
Right.
and a real commitment to equity and inclusion.
And even then,
Yeah.
no guarantees.
No, but the potential is there.
Right.
And it's a story that we need to keep an eye on.
It's unfolding.
Yeah. It's a potent reminder that, urban redevelopment, it's about more than just, buildings and construction. It's about people.
It is.
It's about their connection to their community
Oh, right.
and their dreams for the future.
Their aspirations.
Exact. Any successful project has to really understand those human dimensions.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that leads us to a really important realization.
What's that?
Maybe the most compelling stories
Yeah,
are the ones that are still being written.
I like that.
Yeah. So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
I think the key takeaway for me is that this new East Baltimore project,
Yeah.
it's like a microcosm
Mm-hmm.
of all the challenges and opportunities
Right.
that cities across the country are facing.
Exactly.
How do we balance progress with preservation?
Yeah.
How do we make sure that the benefits of revitalization reach everyone,
Right.
especially those who are most vulnerable?
The most vulnerable. Yeah, these are tough questions.
They are, but they're questions that we need to be asking ourselves
Absolutely.
as we think about the future of our cities.
It's a delicate balancing act.
It is.
And it's a conversation that needs to continue. We have to learn from the past, engage with the present,
Yeah.
and shape a future where urban revitalization really means inclusivity
Right.
and shared prosperity.
I like that shared prosperity. That's a good phrase.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the most important lesson here.
What's that?
We can't just build our way to a better future.
Right.
We need to have these conversations. We need to listen to each other,
Yeah.
especially to those who are most affected by these projects.
Absolutely.
And we need to create a shared vision that benefits everyone.
Indeed, it's about fostering a sense of community ownership.
Yeah.
And making sure that everyone has a seat at the table as we write this next chapter.
Yeah.
In the story of East Baltimore.
This whole project feels like it's at a crossroads,
Yeah.
Like it's teetering between, reaching its potential
Mm.
and falling short.
Yeah, and what's really striking to me is just the sheer audacity of it all. I mean,
Yeah.
they're not just trying to build a school and some housing.
Right.
They're trying to, transform this whole community,
Yeah.
reshape its identity,
Right.
create this whole new narrative around education and innovation
Mhm.
and economic opportunity. But
Yeah.
the question is, can they do it in a way that actually includes everyone?
Right. And benefits
And
everyone.
benefits everyone. Yeah.
That's a good question.
Ah.
It makes you wonder how you even measure success in a project like this.
Yes.
Is it just about the numbers?
Right.
Like how many jobs are created,
Mm.
how much property values go up?
Yeah, or is there something more, like a sense of community,
Yeah.
a feeling of belonging,
Mm-hmm.
shared prosperity that everyone feels?
Yeah. Those are the important questions, aren't they?
They are. We have to look at both.
Yeah.
The tangible outcomes like economic growth
Yeah.
and the intangible ones like social cohesion and how people are actually doing.
Right. It's not an either or.
No, it's both.
We need both.
Exactly.
One thing that really jumped out at me from these articles was the emphasis on Johns Hopkins' role in this.
Yeah.
It seems like they're really trying to present themselves as a partner,
Mm-hmm.
not just a developer.
Right.
But I can also see how that could create some problems.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like a power imbalance,
Right.
where the university ends up having too much control over the project.
It goes back to that issue of trust.
Right. Or lack of trust.
Exactly, that we've been talking about.
Yes, some residents definitely see Hopkins with suspicion.
Yeah.
They see them as this outside force that's coming in and telling them how things should be.
Yeah, if this project is really going to work,
Uh,
Hopkins needs to show that they're serious about collaboration,
right.
about listening to the community,
Yeah.
and about making sure that their voices are heard.
That their concerns are addressed.
Abs-
I'm also curious about the long-term impact on the school itself.
Yeah.
I mean, right now it's mostly serving low-income African-American students.
Right. Yeah.
But what happens if the project is successful in attracting, wealthier residents?
Yeah. Will the school change?
Yeah, will the demographics change?
Will it become more diverse?
Yeah. And if that happens, how will that affect the school?
Right. What will it mean for the culture of the school? These are important questions.
They are. It highlights how projects like this can have unintended consequences.
Absolutely. You know, it's possible the school could become more diverse,
Uh-huh.
but it could also become more divided
Right.
with different groups of students having very different experiences.
Yeah, it's something they'll need to be really careful about.
They will as things progress.
It feels like we've only scratched the surface of this story.
Yeah.
There's just so much to unpack,
So many layers.
so many different perspectives.
It's fascinating, though.
It is. It really is. It's a case study in urban redevelopment
Mm.
with all its complexities.
And its challenges.
And what's really interesting to me is that it's not over.
Right.
It's still unfolding.
I don't know the ending.
We don't know how it's all going to play out.
Will the school be the catalyst that they hope for?
Yeah.
Will the community keep its identity through all this change?
So many questions.
Big questions.
And I think that's a good place to leave it,
Okay.
with a sense of curiosity
Mhm.
and a willingness to keep learning
Yeah.
as this story continues to unfold.
For sure. Well, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for being here.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been great to have you.
Always fun to dive into these complex issues.
Yeah, and thanks to our listeners for tuning into this deep dive
Absolutely.
into the new East Baltimore project.